Somewhere deep inside a rainforest, an animal carried a virus for years without human contact. No panic. No headlines. No global emergency. The forest remained quiet. Then one day, roads entered the wilderness. Trees began disappearing. Wildlife moved deeper toward human settlements. Villages expanded into ecosystems that had existed untouched for centuries. And slowly, invisibly, a dangerous boundary began collapsing. Most people think outbreaks begin with the first infected person. But the truth is far more unsettling. By the time the first human collapses, the real story has often been unfolding silently for years. Scientists believe viruses like Ebola circulated among wildlife long before humans encountered them. Fruit bats are considered one of the most likely natural reservoirs. Monkeys and apes often became victims themselves before humans ever came into contact with infected animals. The outbreak was not simply a medical event. It was the result of increasing contact between humans and ecosystems they barely understood. Human disruption of ecosystems increased the opportunity for viruses to spill over from wildlife into humans. And once that invisible distance disappeared, fear spread across entire communities faster than anyone was prepared for. But this story is not about blaming Africa. It is not about demonizing people trying to survive. Many families living near forests were not making reckless choices. They were navigating poverty, hunger, weak infrastructure, and survival pressures most of the modern world never has to think about. That is what makes this tragedy deeply human. A father searching for food is not imagining global outbreaks. A mother feeding her children is not thinking about viral transmission. Yet millions of survival decisions, environmental pressures, and global systems slowly collided together until the consequences became impossible to ignore. And perhaps that is why stories like Ebola disturb humanity so deeply. Because the outbreak exposed something much larger than disease itself. It exposed how fragile modern civilization truly is. It revealed how deeply connected humanity remains to nature despite centuries of technological progress. And most importantly, it revealed what happens when human expansion moves faster than human understanding. At sunrise, the rainforest appears peaceful. Warm light cuts through thick trees while mist rises from the ground beneath the heat. Birds move across the canopy. Insects hum beneath the silence. To outsiders, forests like these often feel distant from modern civilization. But over the past century, the boundary separating wilderness from human expansion began shrinking rapidly across parts of Central and West Africa. Logging roads pushed deeper into untouched ecosystems. Mining operations opened inside remote regions. Villages expanded around extraction sites. Wildlife migration patterns slowly changed. None of these decisions looked dangerous in the moment. They looked economic. Necessary. Human. But ecosystems operate through balances most people never notice until those balances break. Scientists studying zoonotic diseases, illnesses capable of moving from animals into humans, have repeatedly warned that environmental disruption increases opportunities for spillover events. Not because nature is attacking humanity, but because increasing contact creates opportunities that rarely existed before. Fruit bats may forage closer to farms. Infected wildlife may die near villages. Hunters searching for food may unknowingly encounter contaminated animals. And in communities facing poverty and food insecurity, bushmeat often becomes survival rather than choice. That reality matters because the world often judges communities without understanding the conditions surrounding them. Many families living near forests were not seeking danger. They were seeking food, income, and survival. A father entering the forest before sunrise is not thinking about global health systems. He is thinking about feeding his children before nightfall. That emotional truth changes how the story must be understood. The outbreak did not emerge from evil. It emerged from collision. Human expansion, environmental disruption, poverty, and survival pressures slowly moved closer together until invisible boundaries disappeared. And the frightening part is how quietly it happened. No alarms echoed through the rainforest. No headline announced that ecosystems were becoming unstable. The danger accumulated silently beneath ordinary life. Then suddenly helicopters appeared above villages. Healthcare workers arrived wearing protective suits. Roads emptied. Fear spread across entire communities. Humanity reacted as though disaster had appeared overnight. But the outbreak started long before the first infection. It started the moment civilization began entering ecosystems faster than it understood the consequences. What the world often forgets about outbreaks is the emotional devastation left behind inside communities. Most people remember statistics, hazmat suits, emergency broadcasts, and frightening headlines. But behind every outbreak are ordinary human beings trying to hold their lives together while fear quietly reshapes reality around them. Entire villages became emotionally unrecognizable. Roads emptied after sunset. Conversations turned into whispers. Families stopped visiting one another. In some communities, people became afraid to touch even their closest relatives. Mothers stood outside treatment centers unable to hold sick children. Healthcare workers walked into infected rooms knowing they might never return home safely. Survivors often faced stigma even after recovering because fear distorted trust itself. The emotional trauma extended far beyond infection. In many African communities, caring for loved ones after death carries deep cultural and spiritual meaning. Families traditionally wash, prepare, and honor the bodies of relatives before burial. During Ebola outbreaks, many communities were suddenly told they could no longer touch the people they loved most. Funerals changed. Rituals disappeared. Grief became interrupted by fear. For many families, the psychological pain of separation became as devastating as the disease itself. And while fear spread locally, the world outside often responded with panic instead of understanding. Entire regions became stigmatized internationally. Economies suffered. Tourism collapsed. Workers lost livelihoods. Some communities felt abandoned long before meaningful global support arrived. Yet even in the middle of fear, extraordinary courage emerged. Nurses continued treating patients. Doctors worked until exhaustion. Local volunteers educated villages despite enormous personal risk. Communities adapted under impossible pressure because survival demanded resilience. That part of the story matters deeply because modern audiences are emotionally exhausted by narratives focused only on collapse. People do not need endless hopelessness. They need emotionally honest stories that still reveal human strength. And the truth is that outbreaks expose both fragility and resilience simultaneously. Fear can isolate people. But crisis can also remind humanity how deeply interconnected human survival truly is. The most unsettling truth about outbreaks may be how preventable many risks become when humanity understands consequences early enough. Scientists continue warning that increasing disruption of ecosystems raises the probability of future spillover events. Ebola is not the only example. Other diseases linked to wildlife contact and environmental pressure continue appearing around the world. This does not mean every outbreak has one simple cause. Reality is far more complex. Climate change, urbanization, industrial expansion, poverty, food insecurity, weak healthcare systems, and global transportation networks all interact together. But one pattern remains difficult to ignore: humanity keeps expanding faster than it understands the systems supporting life itself. And perhaps that pattern extends far beyond disease. Modern civilization constantly pushes beyond healthy limits emotionally, psychologically, environmentally, and socially. People live in permanent overstimulation. Burnout spreads quietly across entire generations. Social isolation grows despite constant digital connection. Economic pressure forces millions into survival mode while societies continue prioritizing endless expansion over long-term stability. The outbreak becomes more than a medical story. It becomes a mirror reflecting what modern civilization is slowly becoming. But fear alone cannot be the final message. Humanity still possesses the ability to choose differently. Stronger healthcare systems can reduce catastrophic outbreaks before they spread. Global cooperation can replace delayed panic. Communities facing poverty need long-term support before survival pressures force dangerous risks. Ecosystems can be protected intelligently without ignoring human needs. Education, trust, scientific cooperation, and environmental awareness all reduce the likelihood of future crises. Most importantly, humanity must rediscover humility. Modern civilization often behaves as though technology removed humans from nature entirely. But outbreaks remind the world that humanity never escaped nature. Civilization still depends on environmental balance, social trust, emotional resilience, and collective responsibility. Invisible boundaries exist for a reason. And when those boundaries collapse, the consequences eventually reach everyone. The outbreak did not begin with the first infection. It began quietly, years earlier, while invisible pressures accumulated beneath everyday life. Forests changed. Wildlife moved closer to human settlements. Poverty pushed families deeper into survival mode. Roads entered ecosystems humans barely understood. And slowly, the distance separating civilization from hidden danger disappeared. But the deeper lesson hidden inside stories like Ebola is not simply about disease. It is about consequence. It is about understanding that humanity does not exist separate from nature, separate from one another, or separate from the systems shaping survival itself. Every decision, environmental, economic, political, psychological, creates pressures somewhere else. And when those pressures remain ignored long enough, crisis eventually emerges where people least expect it. Yet within that reality exists hope. Awareness creates preparation. Understanding creates resilience. Cooperation creates survival. Humanity cannot eliminate every danger from the world, but it can build societies that respond with wisdom instead of panic, compassion instead of stigma, and long-term responsibility instead of short-term destruction. Because the greatest threat to civilization may not be the virus itself. It may be humanity's refusal to recognize consequences until they become impossible to ignore. This is Unchartered Decision, cinematic psychological investigations into modern life, fear, survival, and the hidden forces shaping humanity's future.